Hey, awesome. Very cool. Listen, our next speaker is the host of the #1 rated weekend show on the Fox News Channel. He's also heard 3 times daily across the nation on almost 600 radio stations. He is a New York Times best-selling author of 11 books, and his 12th is set for release in January of 2015. And of course, he is one of the best governors in the history of the state of Arkansas. I asked Governor Huckabee if he would consider running for president in 2016. He told me, "Gil, Janet and I have been praying about it, and frankly, it all comes down to what kind of reception we get at this year's Values Voter Summit." That's not true, but if it was true, ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome Governor Mike Huckabee?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A smart man would quit while he's ahead, right? Look, this is tough. I got to follow the Duggar family. You know, there's an old saying, never follow kids or dogs. If they'd have brought a dog out of here, I guarantee I'd have been done. That'd have been the last of it. Aren't the Duggar family just amazing? And I've had the privilege of knowing them when there weren't so many of them. And Jim Bob served in the state legislature during my tenure as governor. He was a delight to work with. I've told people all over America, I said, if you want to understand what an authentic family really looks like and acts like, it's the Duggar family. And the genuine Christian testimony that exudes from every one of their lives and the exemplary way in which they conduct themselves is such a testament to everything that we hope the family in America could be. And I'm just delighted that I am able to share the evening with the Duggar family and, of course, with you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you for these few moments. How many of you remember back in 2008 when the television ad for Hillary Clinton came? The phone was ringing. Obviously, you remember it. And the announcer said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and the phone rings. Who do you want to answer it? Well, as we thought back about that, I think we know who we don't want answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning. My guess is a lot of you grew up like I did. Your mother told you nothing good ever happens after midnight. And I found that when I was governor, nothing ever good happened after midnight. If my phone rang in the middle of the night, I knew that it meant there was a tornado, a chemical spill, some kid in the custody of the state of Arkansas had committed suicide, we had a prison break, there was a plane crash or an ice storm, something bad had happened. People didn't call in the middle of the night to give good news. On September the 11th, 2 years ago, the phone did ring. And I guess it went to voicemail because when the desperate calls for help came from Benghazi, Libya, nobody answered that call. And today the phone is still ringing. The phone is ringing in Syria, where ISIS has set up shop and wishes to annihilate every person who does not bow down to their radical form of Islam. And the sad thing is, there seems to be a misunderstanding about how a country goes about defeating a force like ISIS. You do not defeat them by telling them all the things that you are not going to do. You defeat them by making it very clear that you do whatever it takes in order for them to lose and us to win. You make sure that they understand that our military will be so well prepared, well funded, well staffed, well equipped, that if it does in fact stand up, they will fall down, and that we may not tell them how we're going to do it, but we will absolutely guarantee them that the outcome will not be what they think it's going to be. When the phone rings there, they need to know that America is serious about protecting the people of this country, whether they're a journalist covering the war in Syria or whether they're a person living in a small town somewhere in America, that will answer the phone. When the phone rings in Israel, the Israelis need to know that we stand with them without equivocation. I've been going to Israel for 41 years. My first trip was in 1973. I was all of 17 years old. I've been going back so many times I've lost count. 3 times this year. My wife and I were there 3 weeks ago. And one of the things that I have sensed is that there are many people in Israel, they no longer know for sure that America is with them. Well, I want them to know that we are with them. I want them to know that if the phone rings there, or if they call us and it rings here, they have a partner in democracy, a partner in freedom, a partner in liberty, and that we will not in any way create some moral equivocation between those who slaughter innocents and those who do everything they can to protect innocents. That when it comes down to the battle between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac, we will stand with those who stand for biblical truth and liberty, and that is not something for which we will apologize or ever be ashamed. We will stand with the nation of Israel. And when the phone rings at the Department of Health and Human Services, and somebody's calling into healthcare.gov, well, we know what happens. It rings, and it rings, and it rings, because nobody's home. Almost a year now, we've been under the wonderful banner of Obamacare. Remember the promise that it would not fund abortions? Just these last couple of weeks, we found out that, in fact, people paying into insurance plans are funding abortions. Let's make it clear that every human life in this country has worth and value. There is no such thing as a disposable person. There is no such thing as a person who is expendable. Every life has value. And if Obamacare is intent on trying to protect the idea of ending a human life for no rational reason, then they need to know that there will be millions of Americans who will say no and will take it all the way to the mat to fight for life. And again, we will not apologize to anyone for standing for human life. When the phone rings at the IRS, we know the software doesn't work real well there. We know the hard drives have all crashed, they've disappeared and been destroyed. I've got a better idea for dealing with the IRS than tinkering with it. I say if we'd ever passed the fair tax, we would repeal the 16th Amendment, we would get rid of the IRS, and never again would this rogue criminal enterprise called the Internal Revenue Service threaten pastors and pulpits by telling them what they can and cannot say. It is not the business of the government to tell a pastor what he can say from his pulpit, ever. And when the phone rings at the Supreme Court, I hope somebody answers, and here's the message that we should be delivering: that the court system is an important part of our government, but it is only one of 3 equal branches of government. It is not the supreme branch. Even the Supreme Court is not a supreme branch of government. It is only a Supreme Court of the courts. It has no more authority and power than the legislative or the executive, and unless the legislative, executive, and the courts all agree, there is no law. This nonsense that has happened where individual judges around the country have decided that they can upend the duly passed laws and constitutional amendments in states that affirm natural marriage, we need to say, no, judges don't get to legislate. And when 70% in many states of the voters have affirmed marriage, one single judge does not have the power to not only upend that law, but to begin to force states to allow for a different kind of marriage other than one man, one woman, for life marriage. And when are we going to start standing up against the idea of judicial supremacy? Judicial supremacy is not an American idea. It is not constitutional. And even if the courts have a ruling, unless the legislature passes enabling legislation, there is no manner through which people can defy the constitutions of those states. And when the phone rings at the NSA, that's the one place they're answering it. I lost my iPhone about a month ago, scared the daylights out of me. I thought, oh man, I've lost my iPhone. Where will I find it? It has all my contacts. I got a lot of emails in there, all that stuff. Suddenly I realized I didn't have to worry about it. I just called the NSA, asked them where it was, and they knew exactly. I said, could you restore all my phone calls and emails and contacts? No problem. They did it right there. So maybe there's at least one advantage in having a government agency prying and spying on everything we do, but you know I'm being facetious. Our liberties are indeed under threat. Our way of life, what we hold dear. And I know there are many people who want to blame this current president, this administration, but may I say that part of the challenge that we face, the reason that we may be on the precipice of disaster in this country, is because when the phone rings in our hand, we aren't answering. My good friend George Barna, who I think is one of the smartest people in America, recently did a survey, and he found that 90% of pastors in America, 90%, said they believe the Bible speaks to all the major issues of the day. If I ask you that question, do you believe that the Bible speaks to the major issues of the day? My guess is, in the Value Voters Summit, probably 100% of you would say, yeah, I think the Bible speaks to the issues of the day. All of them. But here's then the next question Barna put to the pastors. He asked, how many of you preach and teach the Bible applied to the issues of the day? And the answer, 10%. We're not in trouble because the phone isn't being answered in the agencies of government, but because when the call is coming to us from God to stand, to speak, to act, it's going to voicemail. There are over 80 million self-identified evangelicals in America. Now, that's just the people who call themselves evangelicals. This does not include many people who would be identified as either mainline Protestant, Catholic, many other faiths, who really share our basic values. So we're now talking about probably over 100 million people. But I just want to focus for a moment on those who self-identify as evangelicals. Of those 80 million plus, only 40 million of them are even registered to vote. Even registered. Out of the 40 million that are registered to vote, only 20 million of them will vote during a presidential election. And of the 20 million that will vote during a presidential election, only 10 million of them will vote during an off-year election like this one. And of those who will vote in an off-year election, an even smaller fraction will vote in the primary that gives us the candidates that we select from in those off-year elections. I'm going to ask you something. What would happen if instead of half of those voters being registered, 75% of them were? And what would happen if instead of half of them voting, 75% of them voted? If 10% more evangelicals had voted in the last presidential election, we would have a different president than the one we have right now. And I wonder, will we answer the phone? When I used to go to high schools during my tenure as governor, I had 10 and a half years to visit a lot of schools, and I'd often go to a high school, they'd introduce me, I'd walk out there, and I'd see a sea of high school kids, none of whom were saying, oh boy, the governor's come to talk. I mean, the only thing they liked about it was they were getting out of math class. That was it. And so knowing that it wasn't exactly an audience that was just all revved up to hear me, the first thing I would have just asked, how many of you are really, really interested in politics and government Just want to see your hands. And usually not a hand goes up. Nobody. I mean, because everybody was going to be too cool to say, I am. Now, every now and then in a school, there would be some nerd-type kid who would say, oh, I am. And you knew they were going to beat him up and get his lunch money later on after the assembly. But typically, nobody said anything. And here's what I then say, and it really got their attention. I said, well, I don't see any hands. It looks like none of you are interested in government and politics. And I just want to say, boy, am I glad. They were shocked. And I said, I know you may be surprised, but you see, you've made my job so much easier. I came out here afraid that some of you guys were really into politics, you really kept up with government, and that worried me. But now that I know that you don't care and you're not interested, wow, have you made my life easier. I said, because, you know, we've been looking at some stats, and it turns out that most car accidents happen with young men under the age of 25. So we figured that we can save your parents and all of us a whole lot of money if we raise the age at which you can get a driver's license for a young male to 25. I want to assure you, they weren't clapping in the high school. And I said, you know, we also have a problem of sexually transmitted diseases and teen pregnancy, so we've decided that we're going to pass a bill in the state legislature that will raise the age at which you can date without a parent accompanying you to 28 years old. And because so many young people are getting into alcohol and it's really becomes an addictive practice, we're going to raise the age at which you can buy alcohol to 35. And by this time, every kid in the high school is completely interested in government and politics. And here's what I tell them. I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. Politicians will tell you they work for the people, but they don't. They may even intend to, but they really don't. See, politicians don't work for all the masses of the people. They work for the voters. The voters hire them, and only the voters can fire them. If there's something you want people in government to do, then hire the ones who will do it. And if they're doing things you don't want them to do, then fire them. And the problem is we aren't firing enough people who come to this city and forget why they came. Imagine what would happen if the people of faith, if the value voters of America, the evangelical, the pro-life and pro-family Catholics and Protestants from all over this country would let it be known we're registered and we will show up. We would hire good people and we would fire people that should have been fired a long time ago. How would you love to see Harry Reid finally go either to the back of the room or back to Nevada? Folks, Harry Reid has turned the United States Senate into the Roach Motel of legislation. Bills go in, but they never ever come out. 357 bills passed by the House are sitting on Harry Reid's desk. It is a fire hazard. There's not a greater one in all of Washington than the pile of paper that sits on his desk because he will not bring those bills to the floor for debate, deliberation, and a vote. You say, how can we change that? We show up. That's how we do it. That's how we do it. That great theologian, Woody Allen, some of you are scratching your heads over that one. But that great theologian, Woody Allen, once said this. He said, success is 80% just showing up. And frankly, if we don't show up, then I'll tell you what happens. Government does whatever it wishes to do. When we show up, government does what we send it to do. As concerned as I am about who's answering the phone in the White House at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm concerned about who's answering the phone at your house when God calls and He says to you, are you fed up? Will you wake up? Will you show up? Will you stand up? Will you pray up? Will you speak up? And will you promise to never give up? America is not in trouble because of the people who don't share our values. America is in trouble because the people who do share our values aren't showing up. With all my heart, I believe the only explanation for this great republic of ours is the hand of God's providence. Without it, there is no way this nation ever would have been conceived, and certainly it would not have survived in its infancy. And I believe that the only explanation for God sustaining this country is that there's always been a remnant of His people who are willing to pray and seek His face and turn from wicked ways. The Bible never says that He's expecting the government to fall in line there. He says, if my people. That's where it happens. Some of you are frustrated and even upset and angry about America. I get it. Can I say to you that the answer is as simple as it is that we answer the phones in our hearts that God is ringing, and He's asking, will we register people to vote? Will we get them to the polls to vote? Will we hire the people that will take our values to this city? And will we fire the ones who refuse to hear not only our hearts, but God's heart? That's how we change America, my friend. I say, let's show up. Let's get the job done. Let's change this country. Let's make this country once again a nation that unapologetically bows its knee before a holy God. God bless you and thank you. And God bless this great United States of America. Thank you.